Welcome to The Explainer. Have you ever wondered what actually happens to the human mind when it's pushed to the absolute breaking point? Well, today we're going to dive deep into two ancient biblical case studies that expose exactly how we react under extreme pressure. We're looking at one text from the book of Isaiah and another from the Gospel of Matthew. And honestly, whether you know these passages by heart or you're hearing them for the very first time, the psychological dynamics at play here are just absolutely incredible. We're exploring profound human reactions to crisis and how people respond when they are pushed to their absolute limits. So let's just dive right into this.
Now, before we get into the actual history and the specifics of the texts, I really want you to ask yourself, how do you respond when you are faced with overwhelming pressure or an undeniable truth staring you right in the face? Do you freeze up? Do you panic? Or do you kind of just ignore it entirely? Keep that personal reflection in the back of your mind as we walk through these ancient events, because as you'll see, human nature hasn't really changed all that much over the centuries.
All right, Section 1. Two Tales of Belief, Human Reactions to Crisis and Divine Intervention.
Moving right into Section 2, Trembling Trees of Judah, the Anatomy of Panic.
Okay, so we're looking at a thematic mirroring of two distinct passages today, and we're starting with a historical crisis rooted in deep, visceral political fear. Picture this. We're in the days of King Ahaz of Judah, and Jerusalem is right in the crosshairs of an overwhelming alliance. His kingdom is completely backed into a corner, and the survival of his people is literally on the line. We have this super-aggressive coalition. Rezin, the king of Aram, whose head city is Damascus, has teamed up with Pekah, the king of Israel, referred to here as Ephraim, with its capital over in Samaria. And their plan? It isn't just a simple border skirmish or conquest. The text tells us they intend to go up against Judah, tear it apart by force, make it their own, and install a puppet leader, the son of Tabeel, as king. If you are King Ahaz sitting in Jerusalem right now looking at this intelligence, you are staring total destruction right in the face.
So upon hearing the word that Aram had allied itself with Ephraim, the reaction wasn't, a calm, strategic war room meeting. It was pure, unadulterated panic. The text says the heart of the king and the heart of the people trembled. I absolutely love this imagery. It conveys this profound physical panic, this collective shudder of a whole society that feels entirely powerless against the storm that's about to hit them. They are literally like trees of the forest trembling in the wind, rooted to the ground, just bracing to be snapped in half.
But right here, the narrative shifts drastically. God intervenes, sending the prophet Isaiah to meet a terrified King Ahaz at the end of the conduit of the upper pool. And Isaiah is instructed to deliver a totally dismissive perspective of these terrifying enemy armies. He tells Ahaz to remain calm, not to fear, and crucially, not to let his courage fail before these two stumps of smoldering brands. Think about that contrast for a second. Ahaz sees a raging forest fire about to consume his entire kingdom, and God just reduces the blazing anger of these two kings to mere dying embers. It's just smoke, but no real fire.
Which brings us to Section 3, the mandate of faith, the antidote to fear.
Now, God doesn't just offer comforting words to counter Judah's paralyzing fear. He explicitly declares regarding the enemy's plot, "It shall not stand, it shall not be." And to back up that decree, a very specific timeline gets introduced, 65. The Lord puts a strict expiration date on the whole threat, stating that within 65 years, Ephraim will be completely crushed. They won't even be a nation anymore. So this massive threat that is currently making the trees of Judah tremble, it's going to be permanently erased from the map.
So the final mandate delivered to Ahaz is super clear. Unless your faith is firm, you shall not be firm. This is the ultimate takeaway from the Isaiah text. Ahaz's physical and political survival relies entirely on his internal foundation. He has got to replace his panic with an unshakable, firm foundation of faith. If he doesn't stand firm in his belief that the threat is just smoldering stumps, well, his kingdom will not stand firm against the wind. It's an incredibly powerful equation where inner belief directly dictates outer reality.
All right, let's pivot. Section 4, the woes of Galilee, the anatomy of apathy.
We're fast-forwarding centuries later to the Gospel of Matthew, and we are moving from a crisis of panic to a completely different psychological problem, a crisis of apathy. We've gone from the trembling trees of Judah to the quiet, stubborn streets of Galilee. Here, Jesus is actively reproaching specific towns because these are the very places where most of his mighty deeds had been done. Listen, these people didn't hear about miracles secondhand. They witnessed them right in their midst. But their reaction? It's completely baffling.
Unlike Ahaz, who panicked at bad news, these towns witnessed undeniable, extraordinary good news, and they remained completely unmoved. They simply had not repented. They hadn't changed their ways, their mindsets, or their actions at all.
And Jesus sets up this incredibly stark, historical contrast between contemporary Galilean towns and ancient, notorious cities to express his immense frustration. The towns of Chorazin, Bethsaida, and Capernaum are unrepentant despite seeing mighty deeds firsthand. So, Jesus compares them to ancient cities like Tyre, Sidon, and even Sodom, stating that if those ancient cities had seen the exact same deeds, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and ashes. Now, to a first-century audience, comparing Jewish towns to Sodom, which was the ultimate symbol of divine wrath, would have been unbelievably shocking. It was highly offensive. Yet Jesus states that if Sodom had seen what Capernaum saw, it would have survived and remained until this very day. This brilliant comparison highlights a deep spiritual apathy. They are given overwhelming evidence, and they do absolutely nothing.
And that leads us directly to Section 5, the weight of unrepentance, the consequences of inaction.
Because look, inaction is a profound action in itself, right? And it carries immense consequences. Capernaum receives a specific and incredibly severe warning for ignoring the miraculous signs happening right in their midst. Jesus asked them rhetorically, "Will you be exalted to heaven?" And he immediately answers it, "You will go down to the netherworld." He explicitly states that on the day of judgment, it will actually be more tolerable for the destroyed land of Sodom than for Capernaum. Let that sink in for a second. To be given the truth, to see mighty deeds, and to remain totally unmoved is framed here as a failure of epic proportions, drawing a harsher judgment than the most infamous cities of antiquity.
So when we weave these ancient texts together, we see a remarkably complete picture of human psychology under pressure. On one hand, we have Ahaz's physical panic. That's the danger of letting fear shake our foundations so violently that we can't even see the reality, that our enemies might just be smoldering brands. On the other hand, we have Galilee's spiritual apathy. That is the equal and honestly maybe greater danger of letting stubbornness blind us to undeniable wonders happening right in front of us. Both of these texts show us a universal demand. Whether you are facing an invading army or witnessing a mighty deed, you are required to have a firm, active response. You cannot crumble, and you absolutely cannot ignore it.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to really reflect on these two historical case studies. We've seen the trembling trees of Judah, and we've seen the unrepentant streets of Capernaum. So ask yourself, if the undeniable truth was standing right in front of you today, whether it's a terrifying challenge or a miraculous opportunity, how will you respond? Will your foundation hold firm, or will you remain unmoved? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this analysis has given you a fresh lens on these incredible ancient texts. See you next time.